And so as an owner, he had to remind his kids about the fact that, hey, when we're at work, we're not family. This is a professional relationship. So his son was coming into work, a new member of the finance team, and Jeffrey walked into his office and said, "Here, I ain't your daddy, boy."
Welcome to The Roots of Success, the premier landscapers podcast that brings you the latest tips and strategies for successful landscape business. I'm Jim Calley, one of the principals and coaches of McFarland Stanford. Jason New and I started McFarland Stanford to coach landscape businesses after years in the industry ourselves. Now, more than 10 years since we began, McFarland has a deep bench of coaches and subject matter experts who work with our clients on very specific issues of business. Whether you're struggling with people, profits, or just day-to-day challenges, our coaches and guests have the real-world experience and practical advice to help you build a thriving and profitable landscape business.
Welcome to The Roots of Success, the premier landscapers podcast. We are working right now to leverage new formats. We're leveraging the expertise we have with a team with hosts that are going to be joining us in a member roundtable today. Jason New here with McFarland Stanford. Glad to join you here for The Roots of Success in our podcast today. My background, joined the company for meeting Jim and us working together and many years ago in a landscape company. My background is working through a corporate world of Brickman Group that then led into a small company that was out of Dallas, and we grew a company there from a very small team to a very large team over a 7-year period where really I learned a ton. I learned a lot of practical application things that helped me grow and help our clients today in the way of growing maintenance companies, recurring services, and really getting their teams built for success as they're growing through things. And so as we're introducing ourselves, I want to make sure you understand we have a deep bench of coaches and expertise that I want to make sure you get to know and introduce today. And so next to me, I have Barrett Chow. Barrett, can you kick us off with some introductions?
Of course. Barrett Chow, Executive Coach and Director of Recruiting. My career has been in human resources, and I actually used to be a client of McFarland Stanford. My career has spanned multiple industries, from professional sports to landscaping to private travel, as well as software. So recruiting and people have been my passion. So I'm excited to help build teams and solve people problems for our clients.
All right, Chris Penchick. I focus on sales and operational leadership, and so not too dissimilar from most people in landscaping. I grew up in landscaping and started mowing at 12. Had my own lawn business that I ran all the way up until I went to college, where I went to go study horticulture and landscape design. From there, moved into the industry professionally and worked for a couple of large outfits, a couple of large commercial outfits, where I got to cut my teeth on the operational side first before I moved into sales. And then once I moved into sales, had an opportunity to really start moving into what sales looks like as we evolved what a company was and how we took it from 4 to 32 million, and got to be an intricate part of what and how we did that and what that looked like. And have learned a lot of stuff that I now get to teach other professionals what and how we do things.
My name is Kevin Keim. It's nice to meet you all. I come from a corporate background after 13 years with Dow Chemical, mainly in the professional pest management space. Went and worked for a bit in some of the technology sector, and then arrived most recently at Innovative Pest Control, where I helped their continued growth and a successful exit in this May. And so I bring a corporate to entrepreneurial background with a focus in sales, marketing, and operational excellence.
And I'm Vince Torchia, Vice President of the Grow Group. Happy to be partnered with Marty Grunder. It's actually my 15th year of working with Marty, so I started there as a general intern, learning more about landscaping, working with the owners and leaders of landscaping companies. Fortunate enough to be at a landscaping company, watching them grow, seeing what a morning rollout looks like. And then I decided to go back to law school later in my career. So again, a general leadership coach, but I do like to dive into the legal compliance aspects of what companies are going through, aside from the general leadership that, again, I've picked up with 15 years of working with Marty and Grunder Landscaping Company.
Hi, my name is Jim Calley. I've been in the industry now for almost 20 years. Started as a client, learned more about the industry from the aspect of, how could I work locally and not travel so much? Joined a landscaping firm, just like Jason. Together we helped grow a team with Chris over a period of 7 years. And at the end of the day, we wanted to be a bigger part of the industry, whether it was involved in associations and now into the coaching side of the world, where we
help take all of our tips and tricks and strategies that we've learned over the years, listen really well, and help formulate a strategy for all of our clients every day. Love what I do.
Love that. Well, let's jump into this. We're going to do some quick fire questions around some things that we are experiencing with our clients, our peer groups, and things that we're working on, and some things that are coming up lately, right? So new trends. And one of my first questions we're jumping into, and we're just going to get some feedback from each of you, is our clients' backlogs are shrinking. And so what are we sharing, or what are we learning as far as best practices on what we're doing to move that forward and drive the business forward right now? Who wants to kick us off?
I'll kick it off. I've had quite a few conversations this week about that. People don't know what they don't know, and whether it's internally in your team or whether it's with your clientele being your partners, tell them you've got time available. The funny thing that I'm seeing actually with a number of our clients at the present moment happens to be that they've got a backlog starting September the 15th. They've got this 6-week period right now, and how are they going to fill it? I said, tell them. Let's put an email out there and tell people, and that may trigger some things in their own heads that you may count on your account manager or others to make sure you're getting your messaging out. But that's certainly one important part. But the second piece of that would be just put it in a marketing email and say, hey, we've got openings for the next 6 weeks. What can we do for you? How do we get your house ready for fall? We've got openings, and as a client, we want you to know first.
That's a great answer. I love that because it gives a sense of urgency around also the timeline of when you're open to do it.
Bingo. The sense of urgency is key.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I had an opportunity to teach at a conference this past week where this actually came up. They were talking about the struggle that we're having now with sales and how that looks different than what we've had in the past. And it's been interesting because when we were talking, it was about the fact that we're kind of back to that pre-2019, pre-2020 sales phase where the work doesn't just walk in the door. And we've got to get back to more of that proactive hunting, proactive business development, a little bit more of the old school mentality of what and how we go hunt down prospects, which I think over the last 4 or 5 years, people have gotten very content and very complacent as to what and how we approach sales, because sales were just falling at our feet, and that was very easy to take on. So when we look at how we solve that, a lot of the conversations I think we're having now are centered around the fact of how do we develop relationships, how do we go deeper with relationships, how do we look at the low-hanging fruit that's sitting in front of us, the irrigation repairs, the seasonal enhancements, the high margin opportunities that are really just, they're there every day, and the landscape gives it to us. We just have to go out there and be effective and efficient about what and how we approach it and how we go attack it and methodically work through those systems. But the work is there, it hasn't gone away. It's still there. It's very much still in process. It's still being developed. There's a lot of money moving around. But you've got to go hunt it down, and you've got to go find creative ways to go solve that. And that's where I think a lot of the conversations are going now.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback directly off of Chris, because I think that Chris is exactly right in terms of the coaching and the messaging that we want our clients to hear, is that we are fortunate to be working with companies that have been growing. And so they've been putting work into the ground. And as Chris said, landscapes mature over time. So the $45,000, $60,000 job you put in a year ago, it's going to look different now. So can we set up some property walks? Can we draw a line in the sand and go, hey, anybody that spent money with us last year over X amount of dollars, we need to go do some property walks with them, because their properties are going to look different. Maybe we've been maintaining them, maybe we haven't been maintaining them, but people are spending money. So let's go on some property walks, let's be proactive, and let's not just assume things are going to come in the door. Let's get out and walk properties. Exactly what Chris said. I think that we have to go back to some of the things that got us to growing our business, which was some good old-fashioned hustle, some good old-fashioned property walks, showing your expertise and showing that you care about the maturity of their landscape. This is not a transaction for us, this is a relationship. So let's go walk properties, let's suggest things that we can do, and let's make sure that we are maintaining that relationship with our clients.
Thank you, yeah.
I've seen a lot of success with my clients who have more of a new sales backlog drought, and actually going in and tapping into previous and existing clients, right?
Yeah.
I think we get enamored with filling that backlog with new sales, and we sometimes, to Vince and Chris's point, we forget that we have relationships built with existing clients. We've done good work, and that usually leads to more work and tapping into, okay, your landscape's grown in 3 years. How do we make this better? And people's lives change. Kids go to college. You don't need certain things in your backyard anymore, so we can upgrade it and make it more functional for what stage of life you're in now.
I'm going to challenge Chris real quick on some of the comments that he made, meaning that the longer term aspects of relationships, 100% spot on where you're at, right? Now it's the immediate need. Okay, so what do you do today, right? So answer that, and then the flip side of that is after what do you do today? What do you plan for next, and how do you get people to make this more of a system of a relationship as opposed to one that just happens gutturally when you don't have any work?
Yeah, I know it's a really good way of putting it. So I'll use the example of like a maintenance business developer. Like a maintenance business developer works with property manager A. Property manager A manages 10 properties. Well, it turns out we only manage 2 of those 10 properties, right? So when we talk about how do we further develop a relationship, well, rather than us going out and creating all these new conversations with cold leads of people who've never seen our services, never seen our trucks, know nothing about what we do, I always like to say, well, what can we do to go deeper with property manager A? And how do we go from 2 properties to 4 to 6 properties? And then, oh, by the way, property manager A actually works at a firm that has 10 other property managers. What other properties do they have? Because if you take 10 other property managers times 10 properties, immediately we've got a pipeline of opportunity that's like right there at our grass of somebody that's already seen our work, already knows what we're capable of, already knows the quality and the performance.
Right.
We already have put our foot in the door. We just want to go a little bit deeper and take that next step to start enhancing what those opportunities look like.
Or take that relationship that you have with that property manager, and even though you're not taking care of that 5th, 6th, and 7th property, maybe that 5th, 6th, and 7th property needs an enhancement tomorrow, and that's our first step into the property as you manage those relationships. It doesn't have to be the long-term sale. It doesn't have to be the long-term contract you're looking for. It's more about showing the work and having an opportunity to fill a need, immediate need that they have that didn't know how they were going to solve.
Yeah, and then I always like to say, to me, once I've bid the work, I've already put in the effort to go measure the property. Even if I lost it, those are still existing properties that are out there, right? And so there's no reason why you shouldn't be going back to these on a regular basis, because they may not go with you in year 1, they may go with you in year 3 or 5 or 6, but you've already done the legwork. You've got the measurements, you've got everything. These should stay on your list until, you feel like, hey, it's just not the right client for us.
Relentless.
Yeah, so it's just that persistence that you have to go after.
Right.
I think we've all focused a lot on taking your current book of business and focusing on that. And it can be a gut knee-jerk reaction to go spend lots of money on marketing and try to pull in more leads and fill that pipeline that way. But the reality is this goes back to basic blocking and tackling of marketing. You already have leads that you didn't close. And they may have not gone with you. They might have not done the work at all. And there's an opportunity to go back to those clients and talk to them. And if they did go with somebody else, then go back, clean up. Because, to your point, that property's not going to look the same. And maybe you can come in and politely point out that you would have done a better job, but you can correct their mistakes now and be able to pull in some maintenance. And Jim, you mentioned that's filling the need now.
Right.
How do you go past that? And I'm amazed that you did not mention this, but you should have a sales calendar.
Ding, 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 ding. That's what I was looking for.
To be able to talk about that. And I know that's another talk that we talked about earlier this week about taking now and planning ahead for the fall, for the winter, for spring. And, the world keeps spinning and we're going to need to keep using whatever strategy now for next fall. So build that calendar out and focus on that so that your team knows, what game plan to go put into place when needed.
Yeah, well said. And I'd say from all of these things that you're speaking to, it's really getting your team to understand that, helping them, train them, the sales activities that really drive progress and success and the things that you're talking about. So these are great points. I appreciate you guys bringing that up. All right, question 2. Ready to run into it? Does your team know how you make money? Do we know how to make money as a company? How do they learn that? How are people sharing that? And do they know it?
You mean we don't all work for the Salvation Army?
We're for profit?
Money's important.
First step is asking them if they know how we make money, right? You might be surprised. There will be people on your teams that know exactly how to make money. But in our experience, that has not been normally the case, right? So first step is, hey, ask them, do you know how we make money? And if not, there's certainly a lot of different ways you can go about doing that, right? One of the examples that we've used, and certainly we used Barrett with your team years ago, is how many pennies out of a dollar do we make from a profitability standpoint when we're quoting jobs? And if you sell it for $1, at the end of the day, if a landscape company, and going back to typical landscape companies in that 4% margin range, we make 4 pennies on a dollar. And then using that example of 4 pennies being on presentations that you make, or even hang the 4 pennies on the wall, people get a little upset that we do a lot of work to earn 4 pennies. That will ring true. But let's teach them how to get from 4 to 6, and how do we get from 6 to 8, and how do we get from 8 to 10. Notice I didn't do how do we get from 4 to 10, right? It's incremental small steps that we make together as a team that we're going to get ourselves to that profitability level that happens to be our goal. But to your question, Jason, you need to find out, do they know how we make money? And if not, educate the teams, leadership, everyone in between, of how we make money.
So, and can I throw something out? Are you a fan of open book management then, as far as sharing
I
those
can't
types
imagine running a company without open book management.
Very good.
And the question is why, right? How do you run a company when the team does not know where we spend our money? You know, at the end of the day, it's a checkbook. You have dollars in and dollars out, and the team understands the checkbook mentality, right? And if you spend more money that's in your checkbook, it's a loss. Now, lucky for us, we shouldn't have overdraft fees, but my point is, you know, when you're making spending decisions and thinking about profits, do we have the money to pay for it, and how are we going to pay for it? And getting the team to think about that, besides you, the owner, is imperative, because otherwise you're going to do what? You're going to carry the ulcer yourself, and you're never going to be able to do better without talking to your team about figuring out how to bring more pennies to the bottom line.
Well, and I'll build off of that. You know, I think the penny exercise is like one of my favorites to use, but it's also finding out what works for your company and what you can connect with them. I was just at a peer group visit, and they have a little bit more of a way to connect with their employees is Busch Light. And instead of using pennies, they used a 30-pack of Busch Light, and they said, "This is our revenue, right?" And they started pouring it into cups, and they say, you know, if we do well, this is what you get. And they looked at it and they're like, it's a sip. But when they started pouring it out, it was like horror. And it was like, this is what happens when you wreck a truck. And they poured it out, and they were like, oh, right? But it connected with them. You could have put pennies in front of them, and it wouldn't have had the same impact as pouring Busch Light down the drain, right? And it's finding also the best way to convey that message of how we make money and how it connects with your workforce.
It's relatability.
You know,
Correct.
Busch Light's a great way to measure that, because over time it could go from Busch Light to Bud Light to Stella, and then you know that the concept is working. And people are understanding money. I think, Jim, to your point about open book management, I think it's important. I always tell everybody, baby step into it. I mean, you don't need to go full bore, open your P&L, talk about everything, and overwhelm people. I think a good baby step that we took is, and we tried to make it, the penny exercise is fantastic. We personally used that. I've coached a lot to that. And the biggest thing that we talk about is visualize it. So we would either lay them out on the conference room table with the company, or at one point we used $100 bills, which led to other jokes. We're not going to go down that path, but it let them visualize that if you just set off all of those dollars, you know, it's a good visual for people. Most of our clients and their employees we make things beautiful. So to be able to give them that visual is incredibly impactful for them, and I think drives that home. But the other thing is to take individual instances. We talk about this a lot. Anyone who's ever heard us talk about, what is a device that's lost really cost, right? So if you leave a backpack, like a leaf blower somewhere, what is a leaf blower? $500, $600. And so they think, oh, that was a $500 loss. Well, no, it's not. If you're at a 5 or 10% for easy math, 10% net profit, then it's a $5,000 backpack that just costs the company. And so maybe that's a good way to try to get people to understand the financial impact that comes along, so that we make smart decisions. Made the joke about the Salvation Army, but it was one that I used a lot, right? I mean, be bold in the fact that we are for profit, because for profit leads to jobs, careers, and growth in the industry. You shouldn't back down from that. Don't be afraid of it.
Yeah, when I think of how do you make that, an easy bite-sized chunk, and you start to think through your average manager you hire doesn't come in wanting to go sell stuff, right? Like, they got into this industry probably not to go sell. They got into this industry because they want to be outside. They got into this industry because they want to, be able to work with plants, work with, the what the yard and what the landscape provides. So we use that, like you mentioned, the calendar. And I always like to say with the calendar, I mean, with my horticulture degree, I always say, let the sales be dictated by what the environment provides you, right? So we do dormant pruning. We do that in the fall. When do we want to go prune mistletoe in Texas? We want to do that when the trees don't have leaves. Why? Because it's the only green in the tree, right? Like, I don't have to sell that. That's an easy sell because the customer can relate to that. They can see that. My account manager can easily look up there and go, what is that green thing in the tree? Yeah, that's your mistletoe. We want to prune that out, right? And so I always say, let horticulture, let science drive what's going on. You know, what do we want to do in April and May? When we're in the South, we want to check irrigation. Why do we want to check irrigation? Because it's about to be 100 degrees for 100 days straight, right? What do we know a client's going to get upset and fire us about? They're going to fire us because the water doesn't work, my grass is dying, my plants are dying, you guys must not be doing anything, right? And all that is just letting, the environment show us what we need to be selling, and then we can quickly script that and make that into a sales system that our managers can go out and be effective with.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes back to even the things that, again, Jim and Barrett brought up with Kevin, along with the financial transparency of an organization, we've seen a lot of companies successfully roll out some sort of financial education, knowing the first time it might not be perfect, right. Knowing we might bump our elbows, scrape our knees. Boy, I didn't define that word, right? Did I? And I got 80 people looking at me. But we've got to start somewhere. And so companies have taken over this version of like a State of the Union at the end of every month to talk about some high-level numbers. You might be talking to a team of 100. 30 of them might have no idea what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. 20 of them might recognize some words and be comfortable. There might be 10 or 15 that are on the edge of their seat because they really want to understand this. And that's really who we're talking to. So I would encourage everybody to have a formal end of the month State of the Union. Here's what our revenue were. Here's what our big costs were. To Chris's point, here's what's coming up, by the way. This isn't just a one-way financial conversation. This is, hey, we're leading into fall. We just looked that our margins aren't really quite where they need to be. Let's focus on these enhancements that the landscape is giving us. But if we never take the time as an organization to slow down, talk about financial education, have an opportunity where everyone from our team hears the same thing at the same time, we don't play the telephone game through meetings and end up with different numbers or metrics that we're talking about. If we can really close in on that monthly State of the Union financial conversation that everyone knows is coming, you will naturally have more understanding as time goes on. I would encourage everybody as part of Open Book to get comfortable with those end of the month meetings with their teams.
And I want to say there's been so many successes for the ones that take that step, and get some help if you don't feel comfortable doing it. But the idea would be, we've seen people do price increases that haven't renewed contracts in years and realize they weren't priced the right way in their market. They weren't priced to make money for their team and for their company. And so it allowed them to start reconnecting with what makes them a profitable company, what are some changes they need to make. And the buy-in from the team at that point gets a lot easier because they know where we're going and where we're headed with the profitability of the company.
And last but not least, I'd be remiss if I didn't share this, but it's one thing about the financial education at the end of the month. The reality is, as a leader, it's about the consistency of the financial education at the end of the month, right? This is not a one and done and we don't talk about it next month and not the next month. Right. Until you're prepared to start talking about this and do it on a regular basis, it's not going to stick. Mm-hmm. And we can talk about that from a finance perspective. We can talk about that from a safety perspective. We can talk about that from an operations perspective. And that's the hard part about being a leader is how do you keep all those balls in the air? But I can tell you grundy really is the piece that's the most important thing at the end of the day on all these education pieces we're talking about.
I love it, and I would be remiss if I didn't bring up that at Grunder Landscaping Company, that meeting is called the Grow Meeting, and it is the third Wednesday of every month. A la Jim Callai, don't rethink when this meeting is going to happen. Oh, we're going to do it on the 17th this month, we'll do it on the 22nd next month, oh, we're on vacation that month, we're going to skip it in March because we're busy. No. To your point, the third Wednesday of the month, everybody knows we're going to talk about finance.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add to that is don't think it has to be perfect the first time you do it. Like, get comfortable with just being uncomfortable and just say, look, I'm just going to wade into this space. I'm just going to do this. And I'm probably going to botch this 10 ways from Sunday, but I'm going to be vulnerable and I'm going to be open. I'm going to let them know, hey guys, I'm going to screw this up, but we're going to start having this conversation. We're going to start digging into it because naturally over time, you will get better at it, right? And you will get more consistent with it. And people will start to see your growth through the process as well. But sometimes that vulnerability, I think, is honestly, it's what gets the team to follow you. It's what gets them to understand that, like, hey, they're in it for me, I'm in it for them. That's kind of what we're kind of going for. So don't wait until you have it perfect. And there's other people that are on this podcast that I'm sure are listening that I'm going to say, I'm talking directly to you. Like, sometimes just moving forward is taking a step in the right direction, even if it's not 100% right.
Well, let's segue into something that's going to be exciting. We follow a process. We go people, process, profits, right? And we've covered profits. We've covered some process changes, some things we want to look at. More importantly, and most importantly, we look at our people. And so the next question for us is, as we are growing and we're changing, sometimes the people that are going to be with us today aren't necessarily going to be the ones that take us to where we want to be next. And so what do we do as far as how do we work with our people? And then how do we grow with this people plan as we need to make some changes for our future? And I'd like to ask you guys each questions on what you're seeing as far as best practices and changes that people are taking steps to make those changes.
Well, I can jump into this one too, because I think that what I've seen become a lot more prevalent in our peer groups and in our companies is we are starting to get career paths out there, showing people the path forward. It's easier to create retention within a company as well. When you can see the path, you're more willing to stay on it, right? And as you grow, people reach their limits, and understanding what those limits are, you have to be open and honest about, you were the leader now, but what worked for us then, we're double that size, and that's outside of your skill set. But in order for you to grow, this is how we're going to help you grow, and this is what you need to do. That doesn't mean that, we take you out back and, you're no longer with the company, right? But it's one of those things of you want to make sure that you're finding the right seat for the people on the bus, right? And the other thing that I really see people doing more and more is that one-on-one conversation, right? Making sure that they're intentional about, this is why you're not in this role, or this is what we see for you, and really being intentional about having those conversations so there's no gray area for them to create a story of why or why not they're getting this role.
Barrett, I'm going to add on to that. Yes. The most important part about what you just described is that you're not leaving ambiguity and where they're going next. With ambiguity, it becomes whatever is in their head is what they think the truth is going to be, right? But if you lay out that path, I look at it as a runway. You build trust, right? And so and as long as you're executing based on the commitments that you've made together, you'll go somewhere. That individual is not appropriate for the next role. You may determine that as a leader, but the reality is, wouldn't it be a better story if the person said, well, you gave me the path to get there, and they wouldn't figure out how to get there, but at least you're giving them the rules of the game and engagement and can put themselves in a position to get themselves there. That's success.
I think we quickly look at this and we think employees on our team, right? But I mean, this also applies if you're the owner of the company, right? Like, I had the fortunate pleasure of going and working for a business owner who recognized that he had hit his limit on what he could do with the company, and to create a role for himself, and then allow me to come in and be able to take the company in a direction that he knew it needed to go and where he wanted it to go. So I think there's always that element of, this should start with yourself too, right, as well as your team, and then go from there. And Barrett, you mentioned the bus, and are you in the right seat on the bus? And go back to the basics. You did this on day one with us. Your red, yellow, green exercise with your org chart. Are you consistently doing that? Are you doing it throughout the year? And are you applying some metrics to it? Whether it's a SMART goal or ways to measure the true impact and performance, and then go from there. And so that's the first half of it. The second half of it is, how do you go and action that new role that you may need to create for that new career path? And I think what we tend to do, and this is a common conversation I've had a lot recently in accountability calls, is I need to create roles and responsibilities for each role. I need to define them. And I think we kind of get AFib over this, and we panic, and we start to think about, what does that look like? Well, start with the basics. Define the role. And the most simplest way to look at this is, I want one sentence. You should be able to have one sentence that defines the role, so that when you give Chris that job, Chris can go in one sentence describe to a client what he does, right? So if that's the goal at the end, then start with that, right? The rest of the roles and responsibilities can be a bullet point list. It doesn't need to be anything more than that, but that one sentence, we tend to build these novels, these 4-page documents that describe what we do. At the end of the day, bullet points are great, but just get a description so that employee knows exactly what their role is, what they do, and what impact they have. And then lastly, and then I'll be quiet because I care about this a lot, is the why, right? If you're going to move an employee, why? Why are we moving that employee, right? Why does the company need growth? Why does this role exist? I think that's a really key point. It's almost as important as the financial element of it, is that transparency around, why the change is occurring, so that they buy into it and believe it.
Yeah, and Kevin, I think you touched on some really good stuff there. And the only thing I would add to that is it's the alignment aspect, right? I'm coaching another individual right now, and all of these things are clearly laid out. And as I kind of start talking to both leadership and I'm talking to the manager, what I'm finding is the alignment between the two is not the same. The growth goals for the company don't align with what this individual wants to be doing, who's been there for a very, very long time. So that's one. Number two, the expectations of what this individual was supposed to be getting done in their day-to-day has grown over the course of the last 3, 5, 10 years.
Great point.
And now the structure of what the organization looks like no longer aligns with what this gentleman is doing on a day-to-day basis, right? And so what is being asked of him, yeah, he's going to fail, because as I'm sitting here going through what his expectations are, what he's supposed to be getting done, I'm like, he's not capable of this. Like no individual could do everything you're asking and produce what you're asking to be produced. So there's some organizational stuff that needs to happen from an alignment standpoint to make sure that we get better direction, better organizational setups, and systems and processes in place so that we can get to these growth goals that have been laid out for the company, the owner, the team member. And so is he the right person? Maybe, maybe not. We will decide. But I do think with the alignment of what the expectations are and starting to put a few more people into seats, I think we will see more success in that person being successful over the extended period of time, and maybe that role looks a little bit different. But that factors into the equation too, so as you go back to all the stuff you mentioned, I think that alignment is pretty critical too.
The biggest thing I'm hearing is that we're playing offense with our team, where I think this is a new thing to Barrett's point. People were not playing offense in terms of planning with their people. It was always on the defense. Hey, what's next for me? Which is a very common question that people get asked, what's next? So we have to be thinking about that for our team as well, because some team members, they're not thinking about what's next for them at all. They're coming into work every day, they're doing their job, they're punching a clock, or they're running a crew, or they're managing properties, and they have not thought about what's next for them. And again, that's no fault of their own, they're just doing their work. But we owe that to them as a leadership team, as a management team, to show them a path for what's next. And what's next might be doing the exact same role you're doing in a different capacity, it might be moving up in the org chart. But for us to be in control of what's next for them, again, control sounds like a word that is maybe like dirty, right? Like we're controlling this for them. No, we just want to make sure that we are providing opportunities. And for us to do that, we have to have some control over this process. So we're going to play offense with it. So again, what's next does not need to be a promotion, right? But what's next should be on the minds of us for our team members, because for them, younger team members especially, being in a role for 6 months, they feel like they've been in that role for 6 years, right? And they're one of 100 team members that we have. And we should be giving them more than 1% of our time, right, in that math equation I'm giving you. But really understanding that these team members that we have, this is their livelihood, this is what they're hanging their hat on, this is what they're talking about at family parties, at Christmas, at Thanksgiving, over the 4th of July, your career comes up. And so if we're not helping them understand what's next for them, somebody else might do that. And so just a good way to lead into this is what's next for our team, and how do we, again, put controls in place so that we can guide them through that.
Absolutely.
I want to jump in one last time too, because Kevin brought something up about, we could talk about this forever, something I'm passionate about as well. But I think as a company grows, the smaller you are, it's easier to wear multiple hats, and you're required to. But as that company grows, we need to start defining roles for the company, not around a person, because then we start making exceptions. Then we start creating extenuating circumstances that actually make us less efficient, versus because we're trying to hold on to a person or keep them happy, versus what's right for the business, right? And what's the skill set that we need for the business, and that will help us be the most effective, not, wow, I've had this employee for 25 years and I just have to find a way to make it work at the detriment to 99 other employees.
I love that. You know what I appreciate most about working with this group right here and the coaches is that we can learn so much from each other. We work with hundreds of clients all over the country, and we get to benchmark things like this. We get to see firsthand when changes are happening, how to do it well, what doesn't go well. And I love you guys sharing these stories.
It's a great segue.
Segue to what's your favorite story? If you have a client story, what is your favorite story?
Oh man.
I've got one we can do.
Here we go.
Maybe I'll use names. We can bleep them out if not, but I'll just use names. Jeffrey Johns has been an ACE member for a very long time. He's got 2 sons that are now in the business. They're actually part of our peer groups now. Very common in landscaping. It's a family business. And so as an owner, he had to remind his kids about the fact that, hey, when we're at work, we're not family. This is a professional relationship. So his son was coming into work, a new member of the finance team, and Jeffrey walked into his office and said, "Here, I ain't your daddy, boy." Yeah, but that's a great story that encapsulates Jeffrey very well as well. But Jeffrey Johns was our Ace of the Year last year, an awesome guy, but I love that story about how he brought his kids into the business.
By the way, I'll second that. When his son just got into one of my peer groups, and when he was doing his introduction to the group, he made it very clear. He told the exact same story, and he goes, "Yeah," and everybody asked questions. So what's it like working with your dad? And he goes, "Well, my dad was very clear that at work, he's not my daddy."
I have a win story. May not be great and funny, but it's one of the aces that we go through. It's hard to make a lot of change or go through things, and they were going through, I think, contract renewals for the first time, and so they're doing cutting grass, and per cut services,
Right.
and moving into a program where he was going to do package services, and he realized he wasn't even charging enough. I think he was charging like $20 a cut, and at that point I was like, I think that was a $19.90 price. Like, this is a while ago. So we got him to up to date pricing with package pricing. He goes, "I think I'm going to lose all of my clients," and he was fearful of that. I said, "Okay, let's go after just a third of your clients. Let's do a third of your clients, and you'd be okay with losing." And so he sent out this whole deal. Out of 100 clients, he lost 25 clients. 75 said yes. And he was like, "I'm making more money on the yeses than the ones that I've lost." Out of the 25 that he lost, a month or 2 later, 20 of those came back.
Right.
And so he goes, "Oh my gosh, I'm doing the same work. I'm making double the money that I'm doing." And I'm just like, that's the win. That's the success of us giving confidence to people that we work with and just reaffirming things that they need to do. So that was a win for me and a fun story. So
My innovative story actually took place with you, Chris, and I'll never forget walking into the landscaper in Seattle, Washington, and seeing all the lunches set up for the team.
Oh yeah.
And that all came from understanding that the team members were not eating properly. It had nothing to do with stopping at a gas station, didn't have the money to stop at the gas station, right? And when he found the need, he's like, "I think we can take this internally with the support team and we can provide lunches." And I think, help me, was it $10 a week he charged them?
Yeah.
Right? And for $10
For
a
sack
week,
lunch.
for a sack lunch, and they got to pick what their sack lunch was going to be, and the team put together the sack lunches for the week every single week. And that's a need that we're not thinking about. He saw it as something that he could provide value to the field, to the front line, right? And that warmed my heart. And from an innovation perspective, it's funny that making sure the team is fed at lunch is innovative, but it was quite innovative, and it was listening to a need.
Yeah, he was one of our most innovative aces that we gave the award to a couple years ago.
Right.
Yeah, and it's something they get to elect into. I remember that story very well. They get to elect into it, and the participation rate for who elected into the lunches was what really, I was like, maybe it's just a small percent. No, it was a large majority of the team that actually elected into it. And then he made it a whole team environment of what and how we get people to participate making lunches, and and what goes in the lunches, and you get to fill out your order form just like you're at a hotel to what goes in your lunch, and they provide it, and out in the truck it goes. And so that was a great one. And so it's funny, I was sitting here thinking of what is a funny story I've had over the last 10, 11 years. And mine comes back to, honestly, it was the very first trip I had just started. We were going to a company event to go speak at a conference in Cabos, Mexico. And I'll never forget, because I was a late addition to the trip, and the event was being hosted at a hotel that I was not able to get a room at. And so very quickly we're like, hey, we need to get Chris a room for this event. And so I ended up down the street at another hotel. And I'll relate this all back because I had an opportunity there. I'll paint the picture of the room. The room was, you walk in through the lobby of a hospital. And after you go through the lobby of this hospital in Mexico, you make your way to the back office, which is the hotel. And then when you get to the hotel, you notice everything is tile floors. You notice that everything has handrails. And very quickly you realize, oh my God, I'm at a hospital for just like plastic surgery treatments, medical surgeries for people who come from other parts of the world for healthcare in Mexico. And so I got to stay at this hotel. And I relate this all back because in doing that, I found out really quickly, it was me and one other guy that got to stay at this hotel and attend this conference. And it just so happened he was leader of all regional sales for a very large commercial equipment company. And so he and I would load the little bus and we'd make our way to the conference every morning and every afternoon. And we became very good friends and actually stayed in touch for years and years after that as a result of that, because it was this funny, relatable thing of like, I can't believe we're here. Like, what are we doing here? Like, everybody here has bandages and packages and stuff going on, and yet here we are going to this conference. And so, I still talk to the guy, you know, here 10 years later.
Chris, is this the rental car where the bumper falls off?
There was a rental car situation there as well. Yes, yes. There was
And you didn't get upsold for 2-for-1 facelifts before you left?
You know, I moved out quickly.
There you go.
Quickly, yeah. So. Let's not bring up rental cars. That's
I was going to say there's more than one story.
There is.
Oh, yeah.
That's true.
Let's just say we know how to work the rental cars.
Well, as we wrap this up, if we could all take a step back and look at what is one pearl item that you wish every landscaper knew that can make a difference if they hear this one little pearl today from each one of us. We'll start with you, Vince.
Yeah, that over communication is needed for everybody. That if you're ever thinking about, are you communicating enough, just have your blanket answer be no. How can I find more ways to communicate with my team, more ways to communicate with my clients?
Great answer. Kevin.
I mean, is it cliche to say that you just took mine? But you did. You genuinely did take
Chris.
I was going to say there's no such thing as over communicating, so I guess it's one and the same.
So for me is certainly remember why you got into this industry and remember what brought you to wanting to push them over, I think at first. Because I really think that's what separates you. That's why you grew a business. That's why you got into the business. That's why you have teams of people that work for you now. So if you just remember, like at the end of the day, we're planting trees, we're planting bushes, we're mowing grass. That is one product that will never go away, right? Like it will always exist from now until forever. And so just remember why you do it.
I'm actually going to steal Chris's from earlier, right? He said, you know, just get it started. And I think it's really progress over perfection. We try so hard to be perfect for our team members and roll out the perfect product, when in reality, we learned more through the progression of it and just getting it started. So I would say progress over perfection.
Yep, awesome. Mine would be, you can't do it alone. You know, reach out to a team of peers, a team of professionals, get yourself out of your head and get help. And this is ultimately where people can help you, and that you're going to be a better person for your team.
And that's a perfect segue, because you and I started this business over 11 years ago, and mine was going to be, you can't do it alone, right? And together we chose to do this, and look at us now and what we've learned. All of these pearls are about, you're not alone. Every single one of the ones we just mentioned, right? And whether it be the ACE peer group that you just mentioned, Jason, I mean, that's one of the largest reasons to be a part of this, is to get yourself a board of advisors that when you hit these moments of where do I go next, it doesn't have to be a frustrating moment. It actually could be an innovative moment of what do I do next? You've got a set of partners or a set of coaches like us that'll help you get there. You're not alone. And where you can take your business is anywhere you want to take it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Roots of Success, brought to you by the subject matter experts at McFarland Stanford. Have a question you want our coaches to tackle in a future episode? You can submit that at mcfarlandstanford.com/podcast. And to find more helpful content from McFarland Stanford, follow us on X, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook.
If this or any of our episodes have piqued your interest in ACE peer groups, we encourage you to join us at ACE Discovery. Just check out the events tab at mcfarlandstanford.com. This is Jason New, co-founder and principal at McFarland Stanford. We'll see you next time.